welcome everybody, and welcome to Library Lion. We've got lots of great children's stories on the channel, and we post new ones every week, so if you haven't subscribed, then please do me a favor and subscribe. And now back to today's story, Library Lion. One day a lion came to the library. He walked right past the front desk and disappeared between the bookshelves. Mr. McBee ran down the hall to the head librarian's office. "Miss Merriweather!" he shouted. "No running," said Miss Merriweather, without looking up. But there's a lion," said Mr. McBee, "in the library." "Is he breaking any rules?" asked Miss Merriweather. She was very particular about rule breaking. "Well, no," said Mr. McBee, "not really." "Then leave him be." The lion wandered around the library. He sniffed the card index. He rubbed his head against the new book collection. Then he padded over to the story corner and went to sleep. No one knew what to do. There weren't any rules about lions in the library. It was soon story time. There weren't any rules about lions at story time either. The story lady seemed a little nervous, but she read out the title of the first book in a strong, clear voice. The lion looked up. The story lady kept on reading. The lion stayed for the next story, and the story after that. He waited for another story, but the children began to walk away. "Story time is over," a little girl told him. The lion looked at the children. He looked at the story lady. He looked at the closed books. Then he roared very loudly, "Roar!" Miss Merriweather came rushing out of her office. "Who is making that noise?" she demanded. "It's the lion," said Mr. McBee. Miss Merriweather marched over to the lion. "If you can't be quiet, then you'll have to leave," she said in a stern voice. "Those are the rules." The lion kept roaring. He sounded sad. The little girl tugged on Miss Merriweather's dress. "If he promises to be quiet, can he come back for story time tomorrow?" she asked. The lion stopped roaring. He looked at Miss Merriweather. Miss Merriweather looked back. Then she said, "Yes, a nice quiet lion would certainly be allowed to come back for story time tomorrow." "Hooray!" cried the children. The next day the lion came back. "You're early," said Miss Merriweather. "Story time isn't until 3 o'clock." The lion did not move. "Very well," said Miss Merriweather. "You might as well make yourself useful." She sent him off to dust the encyclopedias until story time. The next day the lion arrived early again. This time Miss Merriweather asked him to lick the envelopes for the overdue notes. Soon the lion started doing jobs without being asked. He dusted the encyclopedias, he licked the envelopes. He let small children stand on his back to reach the books on the highest shelves. Then he curled up in the story corner to wait for story time to begin. At first, people in the library were nervous about the lion, but soon they were used to having him there. And, in fact, he seemed very well suited to the library. His big feet were quiet on the library floor. He made a comfy backrest for the children at story time. And he never roared in the library anymore. What a helpful lion, people said. They patted his soft head as he walked by. How did we ever get by without him? Mr. McBee scowled when he heard that. They had always managed fine before. No lions were needed. Lions, he thought, could not understand rules. They did not belong in the library. One day, after he had dusted all of the encyclopedias and licked all the envelopes and helped all the small children, the lion padded down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office to see what else there was to do. There was still a while until story time. "Hello, Lion," said Miss Merriweather. "I have something you can do. You can take a book back to the front desk for me. Let me just get it down from the shelf." Miss Merriweather stepped up onto the stool. The book was just out of her reach. Miss Merriweather stood on her toes. She stretched out her fingers. "Almost there," she said. Then Miss Merriweather stretched a little too far. Boom! "Ouch!" said Miss Merriweather softly. She did not get up. "Mr. McBee," she called after a minute. "Mr. McBee." But Mr. McBee was at the front desk. He could not hear her calling. Lion, said Miss Merriweather. "Please go get Mr. McBee." The lion ran down the hall. "No running," Miss Merriweather called after the lion. He put his big paw up on the front desk and looked at Mr. McBee. "Go away, lion," said Mr. McBee. "I'm busy." The lion whined. He pointed his nose down the hall towards Miss Merriweather's office. Mr. McBee ignored him. Finally, the lion did the only thing he could think of to do. He looked at Mr. McBee straight in the eye. Then he opened his mouth very wide, and he roared the loudest roar he had ever roared in his life. Roar! Mr. McBee gasped. "You're not being quiet," he said to the lion. "You're breaking the rules." Mr. McBee walked down the hall as fast as he could. The lion did not follow him. He had broken the rules. He knew what that meant. He hung his head and walked towards the door. Mr. McBee did not notice. "Miss Merriweather!" he called as he walked. "Miss Merriweather, the lion has broken the rules! The lion has broken the rules!" He burst into Miss Merriweather's office. She was not in her chair. "Miss Merriweather?" he asked. "Sometimes," said Miss Merriweather. from the floor behind the desk. "There is a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. Now, please, go and call a doctor. I think I've broken my arm." Mr. McBee ran to call a doctor. No running," Miss Merriweather called after him. The next day, things were back to normal. Almost. Miss Merriweather's left arm was in a sling. The doctor had told her not to work too hard. "I will have my lion to help me," Miss Merriweather thought. But the lion did not come to the library that morning. At 3 o'clock, Miss Merriweather walked over to the story corner. The story lady was just starting to read. The lion was not there. People in the library kept looking up from their books and computers, hoping that they would see a familiar furry face. But the lion did not come that day. The lion did not come the next day either, or the day after that. One evening, Mr. McBee stopped at Miss Merriweather's office as he was leaving the library. "Can I do anything for you before I go, Miss Merriweather?" he asked her. "No, thank you," said Miss Merriweather. She was looking out the window. Her voice was very quiet, even for the library. Mr. McBee frowned as he walked away. He thought there probably was something he could do for Miss Merriweather. Mr. McBee left the library, but he did not go home. He walked around the nearby streets. He looked under cars. He looked behind bushes. He looked in back gardens and rubbish bins and up trees. Finally, he ended up back at the library. The lion was sitting outside, looking in through the glass doors. "Hello, lion," said Mr. McBee. The lion did not turn around. I thought you might like to know," said Mr. McBee, "that there's a new rule at the library. No roaring allowed unless you have a very good reason. Say, if you're trying to help a friend who's been hurt, for example." The lion's ears twitched. He turned around, but Mr. McBee was already walking away. The next day, Mr. McBee walked down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office. "What is it, Mr. McBee?" asked Miss Merriweather in her new, sad, quiet voice. "I thought you might like to know," said Mr. McBee, "that there's a lion in the library." Miss Merriweather jumped up from her chair and ran down the hall. Mr. McBee smiled. "No running," he called after her. Miss Merriweather didn't listen. Sometimes there was a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. Okay, so that is Library Lion. If you liked the story, then please like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you soon.
That's all, folks.